Hey everybody, how we doing? All right, this panel right here is going to be one of the most important of the entire conference. We have two of my really good friends, Dr. James Lindsay and Alex Marlow from Breitbart, wonderful website, we're going to talk about critical race theory, we're going to talk about cultural Marxism, wokeism, diversity, equity, inclusion, and if we have time, we'll get to some other stuff.
Charlie, can I say something before we start?
Yes.
Because I'm on the stage with one of the internet's most legendary man-spreaders, Dr. James Lindsay. Am I allowed to sit like this, or do I have to do this one? Can I? Is this better?
That's better.
Okay.
So, Dr. Lindsay, James, welcome. You don't call yourself a conservative. It really doesn't matter. You're super smart and a good person, but you're really based. What is critical race theory and cultural Marxism, and does it pose an existential threat to our country?
Yeah, it's the end of the country if we keep letting it go. That's the simple truth. So critical race theory is the belief that racism organizes our society at a fundamental level. Racism benefits white people. And the most important thing you really need to know about critical race theory is it's calling everything that you want to control racist until you control it. And it's a total trick. You let this happen, they take over everything, it's the end of the country.
Well, that's straight to the point. So where did this come from? And because I know a lot of parents out here and a lot of students are super confused because they say, how did this happen so suddenly? You could go to the historical roots. Your book is amazing, Cynical Theories. But talk about, like, how did it come onto the scene so quickly? Alex and then James.
Yeah, I'll address this, and Dr. Lindsay can school me if I get anything wrong here. But I think it sort of originates with a guy named Gramsci, who was an Italian. And he predated this thing called the Frankfurt School, which a lot of people talk about. Andrew Breitbart wrote about it about 10, 12 years ago. And these were people who were Marxists in the sense that they liked the ends of what Marx wanted. But they didn't believe Marx understood the means. They didn't think that ultimately that the proletariat was going to rise up and actually take back the country from the bourgeois. So what they did is it dawned on them, particularly in America, because a lot of these people in the Frankfurt School came to particularly Southern California, and they were totally miserable. They came to the United States from Germany, and they thought this was a terrible place, and they had a terrible time here. And what they noticed, though, is that the people, the populace, they kind of like their traditions. So how are they going to get people to rise up and overthrow the bourgeoisies? Well, they thought economics was not deterministic in the end. Culture was deterministic. So what they needed to do is to take over our core institutions and convince people that Marxism is the ideal and the goal is communism. And you don't do that by convincing people to rise up against the rich. You do it by convincing them via their cultural institutions and now today their corporations. I think that's basically it in a nutshell, and I think we're seeing it across the board in this country right now.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And what we're seeing is the end of a 100-year-long process. Gramsci was working in the 1910s and early 1920s. They threw him in prison in 1926. So we're seeing the end of a very long process. So the way that it comes on so quickly is very slowly, then all at once. And so by 1970, a lot of people don't know this, the National Education Association was already funding books called things like white awareness, racism in education, etc., and putting these things out. This kind of information has been creeping into the schools in particular as far as the cultural institutions Gramsci wanted to take over. Those are, by the way, religion, family, education, media, and law were the 5 targets that he laid out. They started creeping into education very strongly by 1970. They more or less had education by the early 1980s. And so if you seed education, you seed all of the professionals, all the future leaders of the country, and you can start to break things down. 50 years down that track, you've got 3 generations of teachers, 4 generations of students, and you can snap it, just like that.
So James, let me ask you, we talked earlier about how at over 75 schools across the country, they have black-only dormitories. Let me say that again. The new thing is having black-only racially segregated dormitories. At Columbia University, they have black-only graduation ceremonies. In Georgia public schools in downtown Atlanta, 6th grade black kids go to one classroom, 6th grade white kids go to another classroom. In Denver public schools, they have black-only playground time where families of color are allowed to play and white families are not. What is the thought process of resegregation for just like the common man that's watching this right now that isn't into the heady philosophical stuff? Can you please unpack how we are now resegregating American society?
It's actually real simple. What I said before was that critical race theory boils down to the belief that racism that benefits white people is the fundamental organizing principle of society. So all of society is built off of racism. Racism's everywhere. Racism is exactly the thing that makes life what it is in our society. And so what they're trying to use as a justification is that they say that people who are racial minorities, in particular blacks, need a space away from that where they can actually be themselves, where they can actually escape the white gaze, as they call it, or the constant pressure to live up to white supremacy. These are real terms. I'm not making
white gaze.
The white gaze,
gaze
yes.
with a Z. I just want to clarify.
I was gonna say like.
Sorry.
Not
GAZE, like when you look at somebody.
Okay. So let me get this straight. So, and Ibram X. Kendi, otherwise known as Harry Rogers, or Henry? I always get it wrong. Whatever. He says that we need to have discrimination today to try to fix discrimination of yesterday. Can you?
Yeah, the exact quote's on page 19 of his wonderful book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. And he says that the exact quote goes that the only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination, and the only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination. So it's an explicitly discriminatory program. You can read, for example, also on page 3 of Critical Race Theory and Introduction by Richard Delgado, that he says that the whole point of critical race theory is to call into question the very foundations of the liberal order, and the first thing he mentions is including equality theory. The idea that we're equal, that we were made equal, or that we're image bearers of God or whatever, that's out. That's got to go. That's absolutely unacceptable to critical race theory because they want to actually create a situation where people who are considered authentically black, meaning critical race theorists and black at the same time, get all the power.
So yeah, I just want to be clear here. So the solution to separate drinking fountains is separate drinking fountains. That's where we're at. Okay.
Welcome to 2021.
So Alex, I think a lot of this is an intentional smokescreen operation by people that don't want us to actually talk about deeper issues that matter. I think that these racial issues animate people, it gets people's attention. There has been, I think a good amount of educational focus on what happens when you do not restrain racial prejudice, and obviously the 20th century was, a bloodbath of that. And so that kind of laid the groundwork, I think, in some ways for people taking this seriously. They should take it seriously. Obviously, racism is evil. It's terrible. It's just not everywhere. In fact, there's so little racism in America that we have a supply and demand issue with it. But talk about, Alex, on how we talk about stuff that really is not consequential when the billionaires are $3.8 trillion richer, our borders are wide open, we have 100,000 opioid deaths every single year. I mean, very plainly, it's like, yeah, I'll talk about how racist America is if you can get opioid deaths below 50,000. I mean, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, cultural Marxism is the greatest gift to the super elite left because these are people who have corporations and they want to do international business. They want to operate unencumbered by the government or by the people. They don't want to be accountable to anyone. And they've realized they have a hack. Instead of Amazon treating their warehouse workers well, or Hollywood treating women well, or Google treating black people well. All they have to do is post a black square on Instagram, and then all of a sudden they can do whatever horrible stuff they were going to do. And you see people who are now spokespeople for racial equality and racial justice and social justice and the BIPOCs and the Latinx and all of these people. I have that right? I always get it confused. And And these are people who might have been against busing because they thought busing would create a racial jungle. They might be people who are, let's say the NFL. The NFL has end racism in the end zone. The NFL is about 70% black. The NFL seemed to be a place that, by and large, was universally beloved until recently, till Colin Kaepernick started ruining it for everyone. It seemed like everyone loved the NFL. And so now they're doing all of these things that it doesn't matter how people are treated in real life. It doesn't matter what the corporations actually do, so long they're not doing the hard work of actually trying to recruit people into their businesses to make it more diverse. They're not actually trying to have equitable distribution of the wealth to the workers in the Amazon warehouse. All they have to do is virtue signal by sending a check to communist Marxist Black Lives Matter, and they announce they're the greatest people on the planet. This is a trick. It is a hoax. And so many young people are getting hoaxed by it right now.
James.
Yeah, so that is all 100% spot on. The two biggest issues that critical race theory are hiding are everything that Alex just said, especially under the brand name ESG. Those are going to be three letters you're going to talk about all year next year. Environmental is E. Social is S, G is governance. This is already a social credit system that exists for corporations that explains all of that. You can put your black square on Instagram and your ESG score goes up, and all of a sudden you can invest with your big companies like Goldman Sachs, BlackRock, Vanguard, etc. And if you don't, they won't carry your assets, they won't manage your portfolio, or they'll exclude you from investments, etc. So they've got a social credit system in place for corporations already. The second one is in the schools, actually, believe it or not, and it is that critical race theory in the school is sort of a left hand distracting you from the sexual malfeasance that they're pulling on our kids, which is what's really going to tear this country apart. Or my friend here, Alex, just talked about Antonio Gramsci in the 1920s, but he didn't mention his buddy from Hungary, George Lukács, who unleashed on Hungary in the 1920s when they had their communist, 1919 when they had their communist revolution, a sexual education program that looks almost identical to what they're doing today under terms like comprehensive sex education and under queer theory and gender theory, etc. And this is actually where they break America. So critical race theory is not just a distraction, it is a funnel into queer theory. And I know I've shared a stage with you many times and said, well, queer theory is a topic for another day, Charlie. That's today. Because what's going on is this is what Mao Zedong did. He separated the culture into 5 categories that were considered red for communist and 5 categories that were considered black for being bad, and he gave people black identities and a pathway to become a red guard by joining a red identity. So if you're white, you have a black racial cultural identity under critical race theory, but if you become gender fluid, you have a red one now. This is Mao's education program from 1966 remade in America, and it worked. What it will do is it will bring children, it will destabilize them. Queer in queer theory means an identity without an essence. You will not know who you are, you will not grow up well, and you are going to have some weird 18-syllable sexuality, different romantic orientation, and 12 genders, and you're going to come home and you're going to tell your parents, you don't understand what it's like, and the family is broken. One generation to the next is split, and you're going to not know who you are, and you're going to be manipulable, and you're going to break away from your religion. Christianity doesn't say that. It says God created man and woman, and they're meant to be partners and complements. So Christianity doesn't get it. So the kids reject Christianity. Queer theory is the gateway to hell. And what you have, I'm serious, it is the gateway to hell, and what you have is critical race theory creating both a distraction from it and a funnel for the white, straight male kids to want to start identifying this way.
Let me connect that to something Charlie said earlier, that it is all about a distraction. And it's not just about a distraction from inflation and from the open border and from China's missiles that we can barely detect and from the fact that Americans are still stranded in Afghanistan right now, they're still stranded there. It's not just a distraction from that, it's also a distraction from the fact that so many of the solutions to the problems in this country right now are actually found in documents we can read and talk about today. Our founding documents, the Federalist Papers, the Bible, the Judeo-Christian values that our country was founded on. There are answers for us here. And we cannot read them or talk about them because we have to do so much defense against genderqueer theory and whether or not you're a terrorist because you don't like men using the women's bathroom and you don't like critical race theory in your public school. That is the whole trick, and the road is to dismantle the foundation of this country. That is the direction this is heading if we don't start changing the conversation right now.
You want to comment on that? So James, that was awesome, and you're the liberal on this panel. Like, okay, sure. Right. Queer theory's the gateway to hell. I'm a liberal, yeah.
Sit strongly and tell the truth.
Welcome to the right, James Lindsay. We're very nice. And, no, I just loved that. So, okay, it's deconstructionist in nature. It's about trying to question heteronormative tendencies and behaviors. Parents are super confused about this, James. And they're confused because I hear, well, it wasn't like this when I grew up. What should the posture of a parent be? Of an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 20-year-old. Caution them appropriately, tell them what to be alert and aware of, and what's the code words they should be looking out for, and then we'll get what we can do about it. Don't get there yet, but because we'll close.
Oh my gosh. It's so difficult because this is so seductive. I actually have a podcast series I've been doing that I'm calling Groomer Schools, because that's what's happening in the schools. This is sexual and whatever else grooming. And the communists have a handshake agreement with the pedophiles. I'm not even going to exaggerate. Yeah, go ahead. It's very much, if you're a Lord of the Rings fan like I am, it's like the deal that Saruman, I know it's geeky, Saruman made with Wormtongue. You know, go undermine Theoden so that Rohan won't fight back, and you can have your pick of the girl. It's the same deal, but it's your kids. So what you've got to be telling your kids is you've actually got to be talking to them that this is nonsense and that there are boys and there are girls, and it's not only okay to be a boy or a girl, but it's very important to do that, and that there are people who are going to use this to hurt you down the road. Yeah, okay. So the brand name a lot of this is getting brought in under is social emotional learning. That's the brand name that America has taken up for the Maoist education program that's designed to to teach your kids to think in terms of gender this and cultural that and sensitivity this and trauma that. And so those are the kinds of words that you're going to want to look for. Culturally responsive, culturally sensitive, transformative. Oh my gosh, look out for the word transformative. Equity, diversity, inclusion, privilege, belonging. These are words you have to watch out for. When you get into the sexual stuff, though, anything is talking about normativity, anything that ends in sexual, you've probably got to keep an eye on it. The idea of gender being a social construct, you've got to keep an eye on that too. Those are the kinds of things. But social emotional learning is the vehicle that you need to be challenging your school boards and things about. I would actually tell you this, and I've said this publicly, so I'm not just making a weird, like I'm in front of a crowd moment here. People who are intentionally, not the teachers that are forced to do it, people who are intentionally bringing social emotional learning into our nation's schools belong in prison. It is the worst form of psychological child abuse being perpetrated by teachers pretending to be psychologists without a psychology license in a non-therapeutic, uncontrolled environment called a classroom with kids that they don't know what's going on at home, they don't know what the issue is, and there are actually examples where they're having 7th grade, 12-year-old girls fill out surveys and talk about the changes that are happening to your breasts. Where's hair growing on your body? How are boys looking at you now? And then they have to share this in front of the class. This is actual sexual abuse. They belong in prison.
And it also serves to divide something that is a key component of American life, or at least has been until recently, which is the nuclear family. When you come home from college and you went as a girl and you're coming back as a boy or a non-binary hybrid of some kind, that confuses your family. That demoralizes your family. That makes the core family structure, the nuclear family, which has been the key unit for guidance, for morality, for education throughout the entire history of this country, that calls that into question. And it is a way for the state, for the public education apparatus, for so much of this giant woke corporate world that we're living in, to supplant the nuclear family and to replace it with total chaos. And that is step one. Step two, we can go on from there. But the first step is create a chaotic environment in home. And once that happens, all bets are off on what happens with Americans.
Let me just tell you that disruption of the nuclear family actually literally goes straight back to Marx and the Communist Manifesto. He says extremely plainly that the nuclear family is a recreation of capitalism, and it is in fact a product of capitalism that reproduces capitalism, and so it's one of the first things that has to be disrupted. So this is a plan that goes back to the 1840s with Karl Marx himself to try to disrupt Western civilization so that Marxists can take it over and run it through a state institution that they're totally in control of. End of America.
So James and Alex, we have parents here from all across the country, and millions of people will listen to this podcast and watch the video. What can we do? It's important to identify, read your book, listen to your wonderful podcast, Alex, Breitbart News Daily, but we got to start to have some action here, right? We got to have some people do some things in the educational space. We're doing what we can at Turning Point USA. We have our school board watch list. We have our professor watch list. We're doing a lot on high schools and college campuses. But what can be done, and then what needs to get done? Because this is a cancer, this is a virus, whatever you want to call it. If we don't stop this, the country's done.
Step one is fire them. I'm telling you, you have to get them out of positions of power over your children. That's not easily accomplished though. So what parents need to start doing, first of all, is they need to start talking to each other. They need to know that you all know here, you're not alone. A lot of parents still don't know that. You're not alone. There is something weird. There is something bad happening here. There are reasons to want to pull your kids out of schools right now. And you have to start talking to each other, create the pathways to start to network. When you start to network, then you have to start to organize and get informed. So that's where you're going to start interacting with these materials like Charlie and me and Alex and everybody else are producing. You have to get informed on this, but you have to get organized. I looked at the state of Utah, which is a great state that I visited just about a month ago, and they have an organization there called Utah Parents United that's got almost 30,000 members in a year. That should be happening in every single state. And those parents need to start sharing information, showing up in large groups, getting organized, and then taking action. And the action they need to take is to completely reboot our schools. People who are bringing in Marxist techniques and Marxist ideology to our children to use them as pawns to overthrow our society need to be removed from those positions. And it's going to require parents to step up and become teachers. It's going to require people to figure out new accreditation systems. It's going to require new teaching colleges. It's going to require so much hard work by you as parents and as adults, and it's also going to take reaching out to your kids to make sure those bonds stay really safe and really strong, because they want to sever that link more than anything, you to your kids.
It's a great place to start. I think number one, first of all, let's talk about Virginia for a second, because one of the few silver linings from this horrible pandemic has been so many parents got to watch their kids allegedly get schooling via Zoom, and they realized they weren't learning reading, writing, and arithmetic. They weren't learning the founding documents. They weren't learning the Enlightenment thinkers. They were learning CRT. They were learning Ibram X. Kendi. They were learning Robin DiAngelo and white privilege, or whatever it is, white fragility, which just means that you don't know how special you are if you're white. Like, what is white fragility even?
Yeah, white fragility is that if you disagree with critical race theory, you have a psychological disorder called white fragility. You're emotionally too fragile to handle it.
So when parents realized that this is what they were being taught, they stood up and they got people thrown off school boards. They got a Republican to win a governor, even though you had a situation where the left was controlling a state that was traditionally more of a neutral state. So there is hope when people get involved on a micro level. I think other things you can do is boycott. And I know this is not a tactic I would have recommended 10 years ago, but I think if businesses are showing woke values, you should not support them. You should find alternatives.
Yes.
I will tell you one thing that I do, is that when I'm about to buy a product from a business that I haven't supported before, I do go on their Instagram and I do look for that black square. And if I see it, I will not buy their product. I will buy an alternative product. And I recommend all of you do that as well. There are other brands out there, and if you find that there is a brand that you think, even if it's with a wink and a nod, does share some of your values, support that business. Make sure they thrive. Make sure that you're supporting people who are trying to take on some of these woke corporations, not just with your minds and with your voice, but also with your dollars. Make it so that this is a whole conservative ecosystem where people can thrive and grow wealthy and strong and powerful in numbers because they are supporting what it means to be the United States of America. And I think that's something that we could all start doing right this second. The last thing that I really think that we should do, which is so important, is beyond just overwhelming the system, is this is going to be a legal battle. And we need to make sure we have the best lawyers who are able to sue people into the ground if they're corrupting our youth and they're taking advantage and abusing their power. This should not be acceptable at any corner of this country, and we need people who are fluent in the law and know where they can have our back on that level as well.
James?
Listen, don't be afraid to invite the lawsuit. You should do a happy dance if you find a place where you can sue a school. You have to be willing to invite the lawsuit because these battles are going to be legal. The other big place, the last thing, vote. What you need to do is you need to get your parents organized. You get together, and then you need to show up and start asking the mayor, the school board, your congressman, it doesn't matter, every single person in government, ask them where they stand on this. If they waver at all, vote them out. They must be clear on this.
For the corporations that are good and not so good, you can go to secondvote.com. It's terrific. It's a great guide for that. You guys get a big discount. I think it's promo code Charlie or Kirk. I can't remember which one. But secondvote.com, they rate every company. And let's use one example. Salvation Army, totally woke. No one should give any money to Salvation Army.
Can I say something?
Starve the beast, yeah.
I donate to Salvation Army every year, always at least a 4-figure sum, and I'm not donating this year. I'm doing exactly what I said. They will not get my money if they're going to support woke indoctrination of America. That has nothing to do with why I support them. I supported them in the past because they give to charity. They give to people in need. And if they want to use cultural Marxism, if they want to advance that, then I will find another charity. And I think all of you should do the same.
So there was a lot of information there. If you guys want to re-listen to this whole conversation, we're going to put it on my podcast. And thank you guys that listen to our podcast feed. We deeply appreciate it. You guys can check it out if you're not yet following us, Charlie Kirk Show. We deeply appreciate that. This is a very important topic, and I also encourage you guys to follow both of them. This is like skimming the surface of their knowledge of this topic. I know so many moms and dads here in this room are dealing with this. And if you're confused by this, that's okay, because they want you to be confused. In fact, they want you to be intimidated by this. They use unnecessarily long words and academic vocabulary to try to make it seem as if you're stupid, when in reality they're the fools and you have wisdom. And so what it's going to take, though, is willingness and courage, and for parents, and yes, students as well, but this is really mainly a parents' fight, because guess what? As you said, James, this is happening to 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, and 6-year-olds now, that they're not going to be able to fight for themselves, that this needs to be the most aggressive counter move happening on the cultural educational landscape. Homeschooling has doubled in the last 18 months, everybody. It has doubled. And I want to see it double again. And we're super excited to continue to see that. And I think the educational cartel is about to be broken up and disrupted in a very, very positive way. Give it up for our panel. God bless you guys.